All right, here we go. Welcome to the Blade Fit Today podcast, where we discuss the lively world of historic fencing and everything else related to the sword arts around the world. Today we have with us Chuck Goodwin. He's a champion knight in the Buhurt tradition. Chuck is a 3-time U.S. medalist and a contender with his team in the upcoming IMCF World Championships held this year in Spain. His YouTube channel is dedicated to teaching and sharing about Buhurt and all things related to armored combat. We are elated to discuss with Chuck the exciting world of armored combat and what it takes to be a human tank. Chuck, welcome to the show, buddy.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're quite welcome. So, tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. So, as you said, I fight in the sport of Buhurt, also called armored combat, sometimes called steel fighting. Basically, what it is it's full armored MMA. Essentially, you're wearing full medieval knight armor, weighing anywhere from 50 to 70 pounds, give or take, depending on size and weight, what your stuff's made out of. We fight with full steel weapons, blunted weapons, of course, but full steel axes, falchions, maces, pole arms. And I fight the Executioners out of New England, which is the New England regional team. So I compete locally in New England and also all over the country. And this year going to Spain as part of Team USA for the IMCF World Championships, which is in just a couple weeks.
That is awesome. That is super cool. And what part in Spain is that going to be at?
It's an hour east of Madrid. Yeah, so Belmonte Castle. So it's an actual medieval castle. Owned by a duke who holds the event there. It's really, really cool. It's very, very historic. And there's going to be teams from all over the world there and all over England, all over the world coming to fight at this.
Like the nightly Olympics.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. That is super cool. So, a lot of people are curious because everyone loves armor. Everyone loves swords. Everyone loves medieval stuff and weapons and all that. And you are part of this elite group of people who decided that you're just going to put your body on the line and you're going to do this thing. You're going to go for it. Now, the format, as I understand, it actually has a historical context. The rules that you guys have. So, can you just take a few minutes to just explain the history in the U.S. and excuse me, maybe the history of the rules that you guys use and follow?
Yeah, sure. So again, I'll give you my best understanding of it. I'm not a historian, so someone would probably correct me and get a little more details right, but I can give you the general gist. So the rules in general, so Buhurt is basically a melee tournament style of fighting that historically was done with actual knights. So essentially what happened is you had a time when you had men-at-arms and knights who were traveling around, as mercenaries or part of households, and they would want to get together and test their skills. And unfortunately, a lot of people died because they were real knights. And so they formalized an actual tournament format, the melee format with it, which is what we emulate on. And it's very close to the historical format. So it's basically team fighting. So you have different teams and they're fighting. Differences historically, they did actually start on horses often and then went to foot. We don't have horses, but they also did just foot combat like we do. So you have teams, and the team size depend on the team of the event. So currently right now, the most common style across the world is 5v5s. But there's 10v10 matches. So I'm going to be competing in Spain in two formats, 5v5, so 5-on-5 fight, and then the 16-on-16s. So I'll be in those two different formats at the World Championships. And the real major difference, I guess, is that you can make a living as a knight by competing in these tournaments. And what would happen is you would ransom other knights. So you'd knock them to the ground and you'd take them and you drag them back to your side and you'd literally hold them for ransom. And others who have to pay to literally get them back. And like that, there were knights who made a living just doing these tournaments. But the weapon styles we use are very similar. We use some similar rules to the blade circumferences for safety and things like that. They were blunted weapons as well. They had the one major difference between our weapon sport versus most historical sword and weapon sports, there's no stabbing strikes allowed.
For obvious
And
reasons.
that is the obvious reason of no matter how good your armor is, that's what kills the knight, is stabbing into eye slits or armpits or things like that. So they're blunted and they're much more concussive weapons, right? So our melee swords are usually heavy falchions, which are basically just you're hitting people hard enough that it hurts through armor.
Shaped steel bars.
Yeah, steel bars to some degree. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the historical format kind of overall. My understanding, again, I'm going off what kind of the oral tradition of this, is that it's got to be 15, 16, 17 years ago now, a bunch of crazy Russians decided to do this and started. They were all just kind of reenactors. They said we could bring this back, and they started it. And then now, probably 10, 11 years ago now, the first U.S. team went overseas to fight in one of these first events at what's called Battle of the Nations. So one of the members on my team, the Executioners, Jay Brooks, was the founder of Armored Combat Sports, or one of the founders in America, and was on that first team that went overseas. And they were honestly crazy people, because they didn't understand the rules. They didn't have good armor. They just kind of put stuff together out of like SCA kits and reenactment stuff, and went over there and just said, this is awesome. Now they came back and built it in America, right? So, and then it's grown all over the world since then. So there's teams in every country. There's teams all over the U.S. Fighting in slightly different leagues, but we all kind of co-compete across. So I fight in different leagues, but it doesn't really matter. We're all just here to compete. It's a similar rule set.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the history of it.
No, that's fascinating. That is super fascinating. So, really quick, and I think most people who are used to sword dueling in whatever sport that they do, they intrinsically, once you've done it a little bit, you understand the dynamics of the one-on-one.
Yeah.
So the idea of the 5-on-5 and the 16-on-16. Now, it's basically last man standing, or
Correct.
last team standing.
Yep.
And it's correct me if I'm wrong, but it's best of 3 rounds. Is that right?
Yes, that's the traditional tournament format, is best of 3 rounds. So when we're going to national events or regional tournaments, and there's a bunch of teams, you'll fight best of 3 rounds against that team, usually in a pool system. So the top teams out of each pool will progress, and they'll fight each other in a bracket system, depending on how big it is. So that's the traditional tournament. The other format that you'll see across the country that we do, is particularly in New England, is what we call a chapter match format, which is closer to a traditional sporting event. It's made a little more digestible for fans, I think, instead of just a bunch of teams rotating through a tournament. Mm-hmm. It'll be 2 teams that show up, and they're going to fight an entire event against you. They're going to fight a 4-quarter event. So they'll have an X set number of rounds, or a set time limit, like 8 minutes of fighting, a break. And then a long time. Yeah, you'll rotate. You'll have a team of, for 5, you'll have up to 8 people, so you can sub in and out a little bit. But you'll do how many rounds you get in 8 minutes. So it could be 1 8-minute round, or it could be 10 rounds, right? And sometimes it's done as like 5 rounds or a quarter, something like that.
Gotcha.
But that's set as a quarters. What's cool with the chapter match format, and I go a little more, is that it also includes duelists. So you'll open the match with a 3-round duel, and each round you win is worth 1 point for your team, and then it goes to the melee.
So the champions come out.
Yeah, champions, or you have someone. We've built teams that were having a fantastic duelist on it, and they're not a great melee fighter, right? But they're our guy who goes in and wins those points for us. Then we win our, then you do the melee rounds. Each round of melee you win is 1 point. After 4 quarters, the team with the most points wins.
As an onlooker, this does sound more exciting. Yeah,
it is. It's more digestible. We do it a lot for, we do local events or things like that. People understand what's happening. There's just 2 teams, but it's also more grueling, because instead of just fighting a 3-round tournament, you're fighting 4 quarters, and it's a lot. And it's about who can sustain and who can get through it and who can grind it out. And so you become a much better fighter by doing that format too.
Yeah, no, yeah. And, for people who, for the uninitiated who have not put on this armor, it's and I have, it's amazing what it takes to operate in this armor. Can you just go through that really quick? Tell people what is the preparation that it takes to be effective donning the armor when you fight?
Yeah, so let's talk about what most people are going to wear in their armor is you're going to wear padded chausses, and you're going to wear a gambeson, right? So you're going to wear a padded jacket and pants under your armor. So one thing you're always dealing with is heat, right? So part of the balance of this sport is how protected you want to be versus how much you want to overheat. And that can change as you get your experience and where you're fighting and things like that. But you're going to have a padded jacket and pants on. Then you're going to put all the armor over that, right? You know, your arms, your legs, your gauntlets, your helmet, your brig. You're going to put that on. It takes me, honestly, about 40 minutes to get armored up. I'm pretty slow at it. So I'm looking to do it like 20, but you armor all up. And then you're really fighting the weight of the armor and the heat a lot. So it's kind of, you're always fighting against yourself. One of the, for people who don't wear or haven't ever put on medieval armor, one of the lies about it, I guess, is that you can't move in it. You're fully mobile, right? Like we have guys who can do somersaults and, can do everything in it. Like you have full mobility in a good suit of armor. That's why they made it that way. But what you don't have is kind of the endurance of just your regular body. You're putting on that 50 to 70 pounds. And really, it's the weight in your arms, too. Like, it's not just like 70 pounds on your core body that you're carrying around. It's the weight on your head, your neck, your arms get tired as you start swinging things, right? As you start grappling. So it's about kind of balancing that. And that's what the weight is. So we do a lot of training, a lot of weightlifting, a lot of HIIT and Tabata workouts, a lot of cardio, a lot of striking work to get ourselves to where we can fight consistently in that armor.
The one thing that struck me, and this was years ago, Ordo Draconis, I used to live kind of near there, and I went to a couple of their practices. Great guys over there. So this is where I got experience doing this. So I borrowed a practice set of armor, and when you're going through it, it's the one sport where I couldn't claw my helmet off fast enough at the end. You just feel this claustrophobia, and you just want to tear this thing off of you. And even though it's got aeration holes in it and all that, it just feels like you want to get away from the thing.
Yeah, we call it the helmet horrors.
Yeah, great name for it.
Yeah.
And I was in great shape at that time. That was probably my peak condition when I was exploring this. And that's a real thing. Another thing that I noticed is your center of balance totally changes. You got to keep your back straight. You got to keep your head up.
Yes.
Because if you try and do something really acrobatic, like really get low and lean forward, you get over your knee, you've almost lost just by doing that.
Yeah, that's very true. It's one of those common things new people struggle with. We call it head over shoulders over toes. You have to be balanced over all that. The other phrase we hear is look down, fall down, right? If you look down and forward at your toe, like your head will tip forward and then you'll tend to get pulled down because you get that extra heavy weight that's pulling you. So there's a lot of work around that kind of balance and how to develop the balance to fight. So one of the things that is a little unique about this sport compared to most other weapon striking sports I'm aware of is that we really, and I know, like I said, HEMA definitely has its wrestling aspect and all that, and so does like Filipino martial arts and all that, but we don't separate grappling and striking at all in the melee set of it, right? So it's all together, and that's part of it because that's the reality of how you would take a knight down, right? It wasn't just about hitting him enough. It was getting him to the ground so that they were in a position of vulnerability, right? So that's what we emulate. So once you fall down and around, you're eliminated because the idea being you would at that point be at a situation where someone would, take a rondel dagger and put it through your eye slit, you'd be done, right? Yep. So that's the rules. So we do a lot of our training around that. We steal a lot from Mongolian wrestling, which is a style of wrestling where if you touch the ground, you're eliminated. The Mongols have been doing it for 3,000 years. So we take a lot of their techniques. We use a lot of judo as well, modified judo, and then a lot of historical wrestling arts as well. And it's and the thing that is a little different again, HEMA. Like I said, the point of HEMA, again, correct me if I'm wrong, because I only have the exposure I know to it, but it's much more about recreating and emulating and understanding the history of it so it's not lost as well as then using it.
Right. The history in the duel. Yeah.
Ours is much more about the sportification of taking this thing that was done and saying what would actually work, right? And if there's something that works better, we're going to use it and see how it works. We're going to apply it.
I mean, historical fencing, to be fair with HEMA, it's like this vast thing. It's this
that's
whole
fair. That's
panoply, fair. Right? And some people are, well, my personal opinion is that I just like to fight.
Yeah.
But if I learn a certain way, that's cool, right? And so I have to, tip my cap to people who really have gotten into the historical treatises, from the old German, the old English, the old Italian, and have translated this, worked on it, wrote books about it in English, so guys like me can kind of get into it a little bit, So I heavily rely on those guys. But at the end of the day, I just want to learn how to sword fight competently. And I think most people, that's kind of where they're at. Certainly not everybody, but yeah, I mean, I think that's most historical fencers out there. But yeah, but there's a definite, like you say, there's a definite delineation between the sword fight and the grappling. If you want to do those two things, typically they're separated, right? So there's the wrestling. If you want to grapple, there's the wrestling, or you've got the sword fighting.
Yeah. And the other thing you talked about, obviously, is the difference between the fact that we're fighting in teams, right? So it's not just me worried about the person in front of me. It's worried about the other 4 people in a 5-on-5 where they're at, right? So my head is on a swivel. I'm constantly aware of field awareness, situational awareness, essentially, like where people are. And there's no cheap shot. And there's illegal things you can't do. Like you can't hit back of the knee, you can't hit groin, but there's no such thing as a cheap shot in our sport. If you can cross check me from behind and throw me across the ring on the ground, then that's good on you. That happened in Nashville to me recently. Is the one time I had a bad hit where guy got behind me, basically ran a J hook and behind us, didn't realize it. And man, he just blasted me across the list. And next thing I knew, it was in the air, and I was like, what's happening? And I was on the ground, right? And that's great. Good job for them. They won that round, right? At least they won that. I don't know if they won the round, but they won that moment against me. I forget who won the round. So that's a lot of it. It's about work, and it's about working as a team, right? So
sure.
How do you build your team? What are your skill sets? We have different weapons, so people will use different weapons and different skills based on what they're good at and how you want to build the format of your team. There's definitely more successful or less successful builds, but teams are still figuring out. The sport is still new. Mm-hmm. We're still developing it to where we're like the first 10 years of the NBA. We're still kind of, somewhat we're throwing diaper shots and, really bad layups. And then 40 years from now, there'll probably be something that's way better that we don't even know about. Right.
Yeah.
So,
well, let's get into the strategy really quick. So with 5-on-5, I mean, because there is an art to it. It's not just, let's go through it. So different strategies. What are some of the strategies you got? Let's start with the 5-on-5s.
Yeah. So 5-on-5 being the most common. So one of the things you're going to be looking at with your team is positions. And I'm going to simplify it to probably the easiest explanation there is on it. And there's, again, teams are lined up slightly differently than this, but you'll often have your 2 rail people. So they're on each side of the rail on that list. And they're often your bigger guys, your tanks. They're usually fighting with a sword and shield or an axe and shield, hand axe and shield, something to be defensive a little bit. And they're often your grapplers too. Then your second in on each side, so your 2 and 4 position of your 5, they're generally, we call our strikers. So they will often fight with like a 3 or 4 foot axe, sometimes a 5 foot axe, depending on the format. And they're there to do damage. And so what they're in an ideal world, your grappler, your rail guy is going to grab his first guy and spin him, and that other guy is going to start chopping on him, right? And work as a team in that way while trying to keep this other team from doing that to you. So then your middle person, your center, they're often kind of your team captain, your leader. They're directing people where to go, and they're generally your fast people. Right, your flankers, we'll call them, or skirmishers, where they're going to try to get in behind the enemy line and get advantageous position, be able to cross check somebody to maneuver, and that's probably the easiest layout. Some teams are very kind of march down the field in a line. Some teams are more like a whirlwind, like they're going to try to disorient you and move you around so you don't realize where people are, and that's based on team culture and dynamic and skill set and who you have. I'll speak for myself. I'm a 1 on our team. I'm the left rail, and most of the time, partly it's because I'm a lefty, so my shield is on my right arm, which means that that rail is on my left, that shield's on my right. I can block a lot with that shield, and I'm very comfortable in that position. Often, my job is to be in a 2-on-1. So my job on the team is to get 2 people to fight me. So I will try to grab 2 people or hold 2 people or distract. And I can generally, with most teams, I can stay alive for a very long time with 2 people. And I will then allow my person to go off and do damage somewhere else at another 2-on-1 and hopefully take an advantage and come back and help me. That's
so you're
the
a pain
simplest layout.
sponge.
Yeah, so a pain sponge. To be honest, I don't get hit all that often with it either, because a lot of my job's to tie people up. Like, I'm very good at, if the one thing I'm good at, it's I'm good at grappling 2 people, right?
Yeah,
so taking people out of the play and holding them and being able to stay alive and comfortable in that. And that's a skill set on its own. We talk about, just wearing the armor. One of the things you learn to do is breathe in a fight. Right.
Yes.
So one of the things that newer people, I actually went down to Connecticut a couple weekends ago and got to fight with some brand new people. It was really great to just kind of teach them, work with them. But you'd see them in a grapple panicking and breathing really fast and using all of their energy at once. And I was like, you're going to be tired in 10 seconds, right? Where I'll just kind of stay in it comfortably and breathe and go, okay, I know what I'm doing. I know where I'm comfortable. And you kind of get that skill. Obviously, as you compete more, you learn more, you train more.
Sounds like that's an experience thing.
Mm-hmm. Still an experience thing, right?
Yeah.
And just like the helmet horrors you talked about, like people talk about, you can't breathe because of CO2 and all that. That's not really true. Every helmet you can breathe in. It's the panic of not being able to see and feeling like you can't breathe and believing it, right? And over time, that dissipates as you get comfortable. And now you go, oh, it's just a helmet. You put it on, right? And that gets better. And there are some helmets that are more breathable than others in general, but not really. Like, visibility is real. Some helmets have better visibility based on their historical design and all that. But yeah, so you get used to it. And you get comfortable with that, and you develop that skill, and you work better as it. And one of the people on my team, his whole training style is yoga and breath work. Amazing competitor, but he never gets tired. Never gets tired. He's the most athletic person I've ever met. I think he does other training too, but he credits a lot of his success to being comfortable breathing in awkward positions. Yeah. He goes, so I'm just fine. And I go, good. So yeah.
That works. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so now it gets a little bit more complicated when you have 16 on 16.
Yeah. So I have not competed. Actually, I've done a fair amount of 10s, very little 16s. It's hard to get that size of event out of a national, but really a kind of a world event, because we're going as Team USA. So every USA competitor who qualifies is going to go. We're going to build our teams out of that. Yeah. So 16s, what kind of tends to happen, that's where you'll see the bigger weapons like pole arms come out, 6-foot pole arms, because you can build a wall of shields in front of you and have those pole arms coming over the top or coming around. You'll have kind of, you have your basically artillery at that point, right? So you'll see more of that. And it kind of breaks down usually into 2 to 3 sections of the field. And it kind of becomes 5-on-5s as they separate and work around. But it's a similar idea to the 5s, just there's more complexity to it, obviously, because you have more people.
Yeah.
And you add that extra layer of kind of your back arm or back layer or pole arm people.
Now, how do you stay communicating? Because in 5-on-5s even, because the sound is deadened a little bit.
Yes.
You have to protect your eyes, and so your the window of what you can see. Obviously, it's different helmet to helmet on the designs. But anyway, that plays a role. I mean, you're smashing someone here. Maybe there's someone over there. Maybe you're 2-on-1. Maybe you're double teaming. But there's someone calling out. And how does that work? Like.
Yeah, I think that's what differentiates a lot of great teams from okay teams. Assuming, obviously you have athleticism and skill level, but if you've got that kind of together, I think communication is the biggest piece, right? So part of it's literal communication. You've got to remember to yell, right? And it's hard to do that when you're in the middle of a fight with someone and you see something. Your brain doesn't. You have to train yourself to communicate in that way.
Yeah.
So that's a big piece of it. It's just, and you have to really just yell. You got to yell over and over again. And then the key is often to repeat stuff, right? No one picks up on the first time, but you'll say the same thing over and over again, like help, 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 help from behind, right? Just kind of repeat it and someone will come over and help you if they can, right? Or sometimes, and it'll be leave me. I'll say it a lot. Like I'll get a 2-on-1 and then another guy will come over and I'm in an okay spot and I'll say, leave, 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 leave. And they'll go. because I know I'm okay right now. Go do something more effective, right? So you kind of talk in that, and you tend to talk with the 2 to 3 people on your side. You won't know exactly what's happening on the other side. It's too far.
Yeah, it gets kind of foggy.
It gets too far. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what you learn then is you learn field awareness, right? And the nickname will sometimes call it dude potential. Was what he's like, do you know how many people are still up? Like, are you scanning the field? And I'll find myself doing this a lot. I'll get in a grapple, and if I get in a spot where I go, okay, we're both kind of stuck here for a minute, the first thing I'll do is I'll look at the field and I'll just count. I'll count real quick, and I'll get really fast. Okay, yep, we're up by 1, good, or we're down by 1. Oh, I got to do something right now. I can't be patient. And you get kind of comfortable in that. And it's not perfect. Obviously the whole point is to make the other team lose track. Right. But that's the goal. So I think a lot of it is just awareness and communication. Yeah.
Very cool. So basically it's just forcing yourself the audibles and then listening for the audibles.
Yep.
And
and every team has their little calls like that they'll work on with the in their 2v1 or your 2-on-2. Like we have plays essentially, like moves that we try to do when we're in a position and ways that we'll communicate with each other. But I don't think that's codified. I think every team's still doing it their own way right now. Yeah.
Right. Well, the important thing is to do it, to try it, and that's so. Yeah, that's. See, that's fun.
It's super fun.
That puzzle, that's fun. That's super cool. In my youth team, we do team stuff. So we use the same soft gear that you guys train with.
Yep.
In my youth class, and we do, like say capture the flag, and we do like 3-on-3s and stuff like that. And the boys, or it's not just boys, but most likely it's boys who have played with each other a lot. They kind of do that more. And you could kind of see it. The more they've played with each other, the more they kind of get it, and they get that sort of situational awareness, like you're talking about.
Yep.
Right. That dude potential.
Yeah.
Yeah. You just kind of, and it's hard to have a skill that you like a drill that you have for that. It's almost like you just have to do it a lot.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of it is doing it a lot. And we do drill it, but we drill it in a playful manner.
Yeah.
Right. We drill it through games, and similar to what you're doing. And we can talk about kind of the training piece of it too. So we've talked a lot about the fighting and the armor. Now, again, I will say that like there are 100 teams in the country, and they're all doing slightly different things. Right. So there are some teams that are much more armor based in their training. At the Knights Hall in New England, where I train, we are not. We don't usually wear armor unless we're competing. We train almost exclusively in soft kit. We do occasional armored practices, like a set practice, where we'll work in armor, but most of it's in soft kit. By soft kit, I mean foam sparring gear. So, foam boffer style weapons, foam shields, traditional like sparring chest pieces, that used for like Muay Thai or things, or there's ones made for the sport, but they're just like foam padded, and then like a hard helmet, right? So the big thing is the helmets we use are a little bit different. They're not the ones you buy for like $25 on Amazon, because sometimes the sword hits will hurt. You can use that, and you just have to play lighter. Some teams do that. We, our helmets are a little bit nicer. We'll buy them from companies that specialize in this, but everything else is like you could just literally get on Amazon for training. And we do most of our training in that. And we do a lot of games. During the summer, we'll do things called battle days, which is basically just one-touch LARP type fighting, where we'll have all of our fighters. We'll invite like the town to come, and people will come, kids will come and do it. And it's all about all we're working on is awareness.
Yeah.
Right. So as a competitor in that, I'm not training to win those. I'm training to the stuff that's going to make me better when I do the real matches.
Yeah.
Right. One of the games that we'll play all the time, it's depending on the size, so 2-man or 3-man forever. And basically it's the field is a box, and you start in each corner with a team of 2, or in the field with a team of 2. Once you're hit, you're eliminated, you go out to a corner, and the next person eliminated comes up, you make a team of 2, you go right back in. And you just do that over and over and over again for 10, 15 minutes. Right. But what it teaches you when you're in that field is there's people coming in behind you all the time and from different angles. And like, you're always moving and talking and working together. And it teaches you that communication, because that's just a big part of any kind of team sport. And this is a team sport. So,
that's fantastic. I like that game. Yeah, no, I totally dig it. I dig the way that it's gamified, because I really think, if we're going to talk anthropologically, I think that's how human beings have learned
Yeah.
For 300,000 years, whatever it is, right? We learn most of this stuff by gaming, right?
Yep.
And no, I dig it. It's super cool. And so, okay, so question:
Yeah.
you're doing most of your training in the soft kit. Are there specific reasons for that, and why?
Yeah. So mostly it's there's two reasons that we do it around here. One, we hold a lot of events, right? We hold at least an event a month, usually two. So if you and by events I mean actual fights, right? And we have we sell out events. We have fans. We have we'll do at the Knights Hall where during the winter we'll have it indoors, and those usually one-on-one matches, small arena. In the summer we do it at a place called Winnickenny Castle. It's an actual castle that's in Haverhill, Mass. That's a wedding venue type place, but it's gorgeous, and we're actually helping refinish it. We're raising money at our events to refurbish it because it's been a little dilapidated. So we're doing this kind of a community service thing too. But we'll hold the big team events there, and we'll have 200 people come out and watch. Right, we'll sell tickets to it, and that's how we kind of fund it. But we'll have those pretty regularly. So if you want to get an armor, you're going to get those chances. And while those are competitive, they are competitive training, right? Yeah. So I'm more concerned about putting into practice the things I'm working on than I am just winning. Now, if I wasn't fighting at a regional and national level, that might be my event. That might be what I do. That's what I'm training for. Maybe I do care about winning. That's totally fine. So it depends on kind of where you're at, what your focus is. So that's the one reason. The other one is wear and tear on your body and your kit. We found over the years that if you fight in armor all the time, you are broken more often, right? And you also have to repair your gear more often, right? So that fighting in foam, I can do that every week, right? So I spar almost weekly, in foam kit, and I train in foam for wrestling every week, so at least once a week, usually twice. At actual classes beyond what I'm doing on my own. And that allows us to do that forever, right? It also allows people to come in and participate, right? Because armor is expensive and people don't know if they want to do it, and it hurts. So if you're really interested in the concept of it, I just like this, you can come and fight foam with us forever, right? We have people who may never get an armor, and they're still knights at the Knights Hall. They're still going to train with us. They still come to classes, and they help out, and they do the sparring events. So you really have the full gambit of everything.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's super inclusive. I really dig the way that you guys are doing that. Drawing in a lot of folks like it. Yeah, and and coming back to sort of what we do on the historical fencing side, I think a lot more fencers, the zeitgeist, I guess, are sort of coming around to foam, that it has its place, right? There's this thing about HEMA. It's like, well, we're not LARPers, and it's almost like we're just now starting to come out of the fact that maybe there's a little chip on our shoulders, because people see us in the park, they're like, oh, you're casting magic next, or saying something kind of dumb. And listen, there's nothing wrong with LARP. But it's just not what we do when we get into it. I mean, I mean, and that's not to disparage people who like doing that. That's, dude, get out there, do your thing. But for some reason, it's HEMA folks don't want to be associated with that because we're doing something different, right?
I totally get that.
Yeah, and so because of that, they've sort of gotten away from the foam. They're like, well, we don't want anything to do with that because that's just LARPing. Well, it's an excellent training tool, and that's kind of why I use it in my youth club. And I think that's a lot more people are coming to that type of training gear, right? Because what are we doing? We're training this up here, right, for our sport, and a tool's a tool. And foam is an excellent way, like you say, prevents injuries. It's cheaper. It's not necessarily cheap, but
it's cheaper, sure.
Yeah, cheaper. Yeah. But it lasts a good long time, and you stay healthier longer. But you're still going through the motions that you need to go through to get better. And so I'm a huge advocate of foam fighting. In fact, that's kind of where I started. So I back in the day, I got invited. Oh gosh, when was this? This is 2017. Yeah, I got invited to go to Poland to get certified for training in MSF, and that that's like that's like a prep sport for the steel combat, right? And so that was my beginning experience before I got more into the historical fencing. And just right off the bat, I saw, man, this is amazing, an excellent training tool, and I really dig how you guys use that foam. And I'm kind of beating a dead horse here, but no, I think it's a serious way to train, and I think if you look at any serious athletic organization that has a lot of money on the line, say like football or stuff, once you get to a certain level, you're not gearing up in full gear during your practice all the time. Yep. You're just not.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of being. I mean, none of us are not professionals, but being as professional as we can be with this is we're trying to take what other sports are doing well, right? And you can't kill yourself every week and then expect to be able to sustain, right? Injuries will happen, right? That we're almost, all of us have day jobs, right? Like we have to do that stuff too. And I feel for HEMA with that too, because I think you're in a little bit of a different spot where, like, again, we've definitely gone to places where people think, oh, it's a bunch of nerds LARPing, but like as soon as we start fighting, you can't think that anymore, right? Like the brutality of it is very different, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think with HEMA, when you're training it up, before my very first longsword duel, I still have to thank that I never met the person again, but I was in a park in my town and there were people practicing HEMA. And I really went over and I was like, hey, I have a longsword duel tomorrow. I've never held a longsword. I don't know what I'm doing. Can you teach me? And they taught me about the most basic stuff, and it helped me do that my very first fight. That was my first night fight ever. Like I didn't have any, my first fight in armor. I had just gotten a used kit. I'd been training about 3 months. I didn't plan on fighting for another 3, but I kind of fell into a kit used. And they were like, oh, you're fighting tomorrow. I was like, okay. And if it wasn't that HEMA guy, I probably would have gotten destroyed, right? So that was a huge help. But I could even then, you could see 3 people basically walking through forms in a park. And if you don't know what it is, it's easy to think that's just LARPing or whatever, right? So I get that that's a different thing. I think the thing that I like about, and again, I talk only about my community because there's a bunch of different ones, but we're all LARPers. We run a LARP out of the Knights Hall. We learn a huge LARP, right? With it, and when I go to a LARP, I go, man, that's a sword training all day for me. You know how many fights I get into at a LARP that I get so much swinging and blocking and training out of that, and again, I challenge myself there. When I go to a LARP, I fight with the same sword and shield essentially that I do in armor.
Yeah.
Whether I go against a person with a spear or a polearm or whatever it is, I have to be able to adapt. So it teaches me those same skills. I get my cardio, I get all that. So gamifying it is a huge part of what we do. If it's not fun, people don't want to come and do it. You're going to get your 3 or 4 diehards who are just all about victory, and that's cool. I like winning, but I also want to have fun. So that's the biggest part of it for me.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. It's got to be about the fun. It's got to be about the fun. And if you take yourself too seriously, man, come on. No one gets out of life alive. I mean, we're only here for a little bit. And I hear you. So, okay. So we were talking about training and stuff. And you know what we're going to have to do? We're going to have to put some kind of a link to the championship in Spain. You're gonna have to give me a link.
Yeah, when I get a link for it, I'll send it to you because they're still putting it together. So it's a little bit unique in Spain. They'll actually air it on the TVs all through Spain. Really? It's a big deal over there, but we don't know how they're gonna stream it here yet. So we're trying to get the actual link to it. So this has been interesting. So the IMCF. So there's 2 international leagues. There's IMCF and the other one, I'm forgetting what the exact name of it is right now, but they're both happening essentially at the same time. And we're meaning the USA, is sending a bunch of teams to both of them, and they're a week apart, right? So we're both going to the 2 World Championships separately. So it's been really cool because we're sending, I think, 140 fighters to these 2 different world events between all the different events. So USA is going to have a huge representation. It's really cool.
Good.
But the Spain one, we've been trying to go to now for 4 years because of COVID, right?
Right.
I qualified, I think 4 times for it or something. And each time I do, I go, I hope it's happening. Right. So it's finally happening. So this is going to be my first time overseas fighting at a world event because we haven't had them since, I kind of got into the sport.
Right.
My first year in, I think it was my first year, and maybe second. I qualified for the U.S. team, and then it didn't happen. So I'm really excited to finally be having that opportunity and going to do that.
Yeah. No, that's so sweet, dude. I'm rooting for you. What a cool experience that is to represent you, your team, your family, and let's face it, USA. I mean,
yeah, it really is. We have our
tabard.
tabards, our USA tabards, right? Like we have, and it's kind of funny. The history of it is like, because we don't have a history of knights in America, right? Most of the countries coming from Europe and all over Europe, their tabards are somewhat historical to their culture, right? Like they're going to have either pick like a large, it's usually not their actual country flag, though sometimes it is, but it's a variation. It's a historical tabard that was the biggest knighthood in their whatever. Ours is just the USA flag essentially, because we're like, that's who we are, and we're going to go over there. Coming after you. That's really what it is. Yeah.
There's nothing more American than that.
Yeah, nothing more. Yeah, it is. And we've really worked in the U.S. to build our own kind of cultures. We're so big, right? Like we don't have to go overseas to fight all the time, so we go for the big events. There's a lot of little ones. There's one in Ireland that some people are going to that's really fun. I want to go to it eventually. And there's a bunch of awesome things, but like there's so much availability in the U.S. to do this that if you're here, there's usually a team in your area. Yeah. Right. So you find them, you get connected, and then you start competing if you feel like it.
Yeah, no, that's super cool. So you mentioned there's different organizations, I should say. So IMCF, that's you guys have been around for a very long time. Yeah. Another one is HMB, right?
Yeah, HMB. So that one's gone through kind of a rebuild, and I'm not an expert in this, so someone's going to know the details of it. There's a lot of that has to do with the Russian and Ukrainian war impacted a lot of this, and who owned them, and so that's kind of fallen apart. And now it's rebuilt as Buhurt League. Which is, so that's the other large one. And like, so in the US, there's essentially 3 leagues. There's Buhurt League, which was HMB. There's Armored Combat Sports, or ACS. And there's a much smaller third league called ACW, Armored Combat Worldwide, which is like a small group, and they don't really mingle much with the other two. ACS and Buhurt League, we just compete in each other's events. I don't even know which one I'm going to most of the time. Like, it doesn't matter. We all get along. It just kind of depends on which fees you pay for. You pay $50 a year to be in a league, and that's it, right? Yeah. We overlap insurance and all that. So as long as you're in one of those, you can compete. Gotcha. The only time it gets specific is when you go to the international events. You have to make sure that your gear matches their qualifying rules. And Buhurt League is a little more stringent about historicalness, where I think IMCF, which is the ACS falls under, is a little bit more about sportification, and I think they're safer with their gear. So that's kind of the difference for me.
Okay. Yeah. I'm on the safety side personally. I mean,
I am fully on it, and I have made videos about it because I don't understand. It's the one thing I find funny is like if something historically but doesn't have enough like eye bars for safety, I go, why? I won't do that. Give me the safest helmet, right? Like that's So, but it's each their own, I guess.
So.
Yeah.
Well, warfare is totally different because if you're going to war, you want to cover yourself as a knight, but you fully expect people are going to die. And, it's just a whole different thing. It's just a whole different thing. So I understand the historical thing. I know I'm probably preaching to the choir. Yeah. As a sportified thing, it's like, don't you want to keep your star players healthy? Don't you want to keep all your players healthy? Yeah. As much as you can, right? I mean, this is a super contact sport, right? Yeah. We're hitting each other with steel weapons, and there's equipment failures, but why not try and mitigate that?
And I think that the argument against it is that it really hasn't happened. And I think it's almost like really good coincidence that we haven't had people, with the less safe helmets get really eye injuries and things like that. But it's very possible, and I worry about it. That's kind of a personal thing. So for me, it's about
I've seen videos.
Yeah, it's so close. I've seen
accidental stabbings, guy bleeding, and it missed his eye by like that much.
Never actually happened yet. So it's inevitable. Now, again, a lot of the accidental stabbings I always say it's funny, accidental stabbing, but the accidental stabbing does happen usually in a duel where it's usually long swords because they're striking and it kind of slides in. So like in a melee, the weapons, because of the point of doing damage versus points, are usually blunter and rounder and heavier, and it's much harder to have that happen. Like a falchion tip is wide. It's not going to go into an eye slot. So there's a difference in helmet versus the kind of event you're doing and all that stuff too.
Yeah. This one is a video I saw, and it didn't happen in the US. It happened in Europe, but it was some kind of a pole axe. And one of the features of the thing, it was like a pointy on top. And I thought, man, why did they even allow that?
And that's the thing too, is most leagues won't let you have points on it. Certain leagues won't let you have hammer backs on the back of your axes too.
Right.
That's because people accidentally get flipped and people start hitting with a hammer, and hammers break armor. That's what they're designed to do. Right. So so it's about, so there's always a balance. I mean, even like we have maces that we're allowed to use. The maces are generally ineffective because they have to be so light to be safe that they don't do enough damage to do anything. Right. So, when you see a guy with a mace, he's one of two things. He's not a good fighter, and they're easy to use because you don't have to edge alignment, or he's a really, really good grappler and doesn't care about striking, and he knows that's a weapon he can just manipulate. So it's like, you always go, the guy across, I go, which one are you? Like when they're across from me, I go, okay, what am I going to run into? So, yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, so let's get into the nitty gritty. I know we've gone round and round. We've got a couple minutes left. Let's get into the rules, right? So as far as the rules go, grappling's on. You could do running kicks, but you got to have weapons in your hand. How does that work?
Yeah. Yeah. So basically you have to have weapon in hand to fight. Offensively. So if you do lose a weapon, you can be defensive. You can block and remove yourself from a grapple, and you can either pull a sidearm. So like I'll carry a second axe on my belt.
Yeah.
Or you run back to your side, and another person who's in armor who's on your team can hand a weapon into you. And once you have it back, you can start fighting. So you have to have weapon in hand to be offensive, and generally fight in general, but you can't escape to go get your weapon. As far as rules, so like I said, it's essentially 3 points of contact to the ground and you're out. So if you're 2 feet, and they always count whether they are or not. But as soon as your hand touches the ground, your elbow, your back, you're eliminated. That's your 3rd point. So you can't touch the ground. Some rule sets will let incidental contact. So if like you were making a throw and in the throw, like your hand brushed, it doesn't count as long as you're not supporting yourself. But in general, that's the rule. So the 2 ways that you will generally eliminate another opponent is you will grapple and throw them, or leg sweep them, or do something to throw their balance off and drop them, or you will hit them hard enough that they will decide they don't want to stand up anymore.
Yeah.
Right. And the way that armor works is your body doesn't know it's wearing it. So if you get hit hard enough in the ribs or kidneys or whatever, your body for a second will shut down and you will sit and you will think, I'm dying. And then a minute later, you'll be fine because you're actually protected. Your body just felt that force and doesn't know what to do with it. Right. And that's that balance talk about versus heat and protection versus mobility. You can wear heavier kits that are more protective, lighter ones, which hurt more, but you're more mobile. And that comes down to preference, fighting style, endurance, and a bunch of different things. Right. So those are generally the rules. Generally, there's only a few places that are off limits. You can't strike the feet, can't strike back of the knees, you can't strike back of the neck, can't strike groin. That's pretty much it. Everything else is in usually side of the neck, but that does depend on kind of the format. But neck strikes just don't do those because front of the neck also is off limits. No one ever hits there. I've never seen anyone turn their head up and take a shot to the neck.
Right.
But those are illegal. Neck's illegal, and that's pretty much it. Right. Everything else is fair game.
Sounds reasonable.
Sounds reasonable. And then you vary your approach based on where you're fighting. So if I'm fighting in a local event with a bunch of friends and we're doing it as a show and whatever, like I'm not gonna, I'm gonna go hit you in your thigh and it's gonna sound really clangy and it's gonna sound great and people are gonna cheer, right? If I'm in a national event, I might go for that elbow gap right there where it's soft and squishy and it's gonna hurt and you're gonna not want to play today, right? And it does depend on what your competition and what the values of that thing are, right? So you come out of different fights with different kind of levels of risk, but in general, we call it hurt, not injured. So you come out of most events, even hard ones, you come out very bruised and beat up, but usually not injured, right? most of the injuries are comparable to other sports. So I've seen a couple people like break legs or ankles, but they would have done that in basketball. It was a weird fall over somebody, and it wasn't like, you did it through a weapon hit or something like that. I did break a hand through a gauntlet once. It was I had a gauntlet that was held on someone's helmet, and the axe kind of anviled it. It broke my bone here, but again, it was a small fracture. I was okay. Like, it's nothing major. But that's generally the stuff. So there aren't a lot of real bad injuries, but they happen. So that's pretty much kind of the overall rule set, and that's it. Like, then it's about, how do you work as a team? How, do you know how to use an axe? Do you know how to grapple? Do you know how to use your sword or whatever you're using? Shields are just as good at punching as blocking. So you do a lot of shield punching. Yeah. So it really is a very dynamic sport as far as what you can do.
Yeah,
and no joint locks. That's the thing I was going to say. You can't do any kind of joint lock.
No
so you can't.
Locks. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And again, it wouldn't make sense anyway. It's not jiu-jitsu. You're not going to hold someone and have them tap out. But the reason for that being is that people can't always hear each other. So you don't want to put someone in a lock and they can't tap out and they can't sit because they don't know. So that's it. Yeah.
And you can't see their face really.
Yeah, but I can't see it. Yeah.
And sometimes, just like swords, steel on steel binds, right? So if you're arm locking someone and you're both falling, your arm is going to stick in such a way, and they're going to do something really bad. Yeah.
So you can do underhooks and overhooks and grabs, but you're not going to try to manipulate the joint to cause pain with the joint. But it's almost impossible to do in armor anyway. So I don't realistically in that whole grapple thing. So unless you were on the ground fighting, which you generally can't do. There is a format of, like I said, the pro fights where it's one-on-one fights where if you throw someone on the ground, you can fight for up to 7 seconds with that person on the ground, and you score extra points for beating them on the ground. And that's super vicious. I've been on the bottom of that one. It really hurts. Yeah. When someone's just dropping a knee into your chest, and like armor still folds, right? That's 300 plus pounds of man landing on you. Like, oof. Yeah. It's like those ones, people will break ribs and stuff like that, but it's no worse than a regular fight. And again, rare. It's rare. I can fight almost every weekend and go back to work the next day. So
yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah.
Let's see what else we got here, man. This is so fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got a YouTube channel. We talked about that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah.
So let's talk about your YouTube channel a little bit. What do we find there? What's your subject matter?
Yeah, so I started a YouTube channel a couple of years ago.
What's it called?
So it's Woodchuck Nights. If you just Woodchuck Night on YouTube, you'll find me there. My nickname is Woodchuck. There were 3 Chucks in our region when I started joining. I'm a woodworker on the side. It's one of my other businesses. So I got named Woodchuck. So Woodchuck Night became kind of the nickname. And so we set up a YouTube channel. And I even have a merch store for buying t-shirts and stuff. You want to help support me and things like that. But we did that. I did that basically to help spread awareness of sport. I like sharing and coaching. I'm a natural coach, as what I've done my whole life in every sport I've been in. And so I set it up, and really because when I first started researching this, like there wasn't a lot out there on YouTube. There's a fair amount of like random fights that you can watch, but if you don't know what you're watching, it's like what's happening, right? Yeah, right. How do I get into this? What does it cost for armor? Like how safe is it? A lot of what we're talking about today. So I just do short videos, 10-minute, 20-minute videos on there usually, talking about different topics, and it's designed primarily for the newer competitor. Right. I don't do a lot of kind of complex techniques or things on there. It's about how do you get into this if you don't have a team around you, or you can't be as lucky as I am where I have one of the biggest schools is 45 minutes away from me. So I get to go every week. Right. Yeah, there's a lot of teams that you have to train on your own, and you get to show up once a month. Right. And you all get together and do a match. Right. So like, how do you develop your skills on your own? So I teach a lot about how to do, sword power work on your own, how to do cardio and workout stuff, like what I'm just doing in my own daily training to help, talk about it, the different types of events. It's really just kind of educate people on it in a laid back and kind of simple manner.
Yeah. That's cool. No, good resources are sometimes the simplest. So sometimes people just need to know where to get pointed. And so that's good. So again, that's Woodchuck Night on YouTube. Is that right?
Yep, that's correct.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. And also, I mean, traveling abroad, that's not That's not cheap.
No.
And you know, the armor's not cheap. And so we're gonna shill your merch store here for a second here. It's woodchuckknight.shop. Is that
That's
correct?
correct. Yep.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And if oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh, that's it. Yeah. So we have on there. So I have on there like my own, just shirts we've made over for different things. Woodchuck Night shirts, hats, and other things to help support me. There's a great shirt on there called 17 Rounds, which came from a fight I was in where it didn't go 17, but it went 7 rounds, where we tied every round in a duel for 6 rounds straight.
Wow.
And the chant became 17 rounds. He just kept chanting 7, like it was going to go forever. And I don't think I've ever been so tired. It was supposed to be a 3-round duel, and we just tied. And then if you ever come to a Knights Hall event in Nashville, New Hampshire, you'll probably hear that chant break out at one point. So it's kind of become a part of the culture. So there's that.
That's cool.
There's also a couple shirts. There's a shirt on there for the Nightmares, which is a local Nashua team that is a local team I compete with. So we design all the shirts ourselves just for fun. But it's really cool, and I like having my own merch and stuff too. So
yeah. No, that's great.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants to help Chuck, defray some of the costs of travel and whatnot, and let's get serious. I mean, he's imparting wisdom for people getting started. So if you want to say thank you, get a shirt. And also, if anyone wants to learn about armored combat sports, in the show notes, we're also linking the armoredcombatsports.com.
Yes.
What am I missing, Chuck?
Yeah, so I think that's the way I'll say with that is also the great thing with that website is there's a that's run by the league that I compete in. It's not mine at all. I have nothing to do with it, but they do have a Night Finder page there. So if you click on it, it'll show you a map of the country, and you can just see if there's a team near you.
There you
go.
So
it's a great way. And they just updated it last week because I remember them saying like, hey, we're making sure all these teams are valid. So it's a great way to figure out who's around you if you want to find out. Even if, and I will say, like, if you look and go, wow, the closest team is 3 hours from me, contact them anyway, because they'll probably know about another local club that's just not big enough right now to get kind of like full team registered that is still starting up, and they'll point you in the right direction for your region. And then you can find me on feel free to comment on any video on a Woodchuck Night page, or you can find me on Facebook at Woodchuck Night too. And if you have questions, you want to get into this, you want to learn more about it, like, I'm always happy to talk. One of the biggest joys I have had out of doing this now for 5 years is that there are a lot of people who know me and I don't know them. And I will show up at events and people will come up and talk to me and say, hey, I got into this because of you. And that makes me like the happiest ever, because I love seeing stuff grow. I'm super passionate about this, as you can tell. I think it's probably the most fun I've ever had. And also, like, there's nothing cooler than being like, oh, what do you do for fun? Oh, I'm a knight. Like, I fight in real armor against real people, and then you show them a video and you go, oh, you really do, kids, right? Like, people, big, kids, yeah. And I have a great story about that. When my youngest son, who was in 2nd grade, kids will tell stories about how cool their dads are, right?
Yeah.
And so it's happening, and my son told the other kids that his dad's a knight, and they made fun of him. And he came home like crying, being like, nobody believes me. So I called his teacher. I was like, hey, I'd like to come in and do a presentation on knights tomorrow. Do you have time? And so I showed up in full armor. And I've never seen kids' eyes go this wide, right? And my son's like, I told you, but so that was like the moment that I always get to have. Like, his dad's show and tell was like coming in this full suit of armor,
Fantastic.
So it's great. Yeah. So like I said, if you want to learn about it, I'm always available to talk. This, I love having conversations like this. This has been awesome. To be able to talk about it and share my perspective, and get that out there.
Well, it's been a blast, Chuck. I do appreciate you coming on the show. And let's see. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I think we pretty much covered it, but final words.
Yeah, so I think I'd say, like, if you've ever wanted to have the opportunity to like see a really awesome event, find your local Knights event, right? There's nothing cooler than watching, like, literally, like I said, everyone is 200 to 500 pounds of armor, right? Of man and steel smashing into each other. Like, it's just a raucous event. I've fought all over the country at different places, and I've never seen anyone disappointed. If you want to get involved in it, even better. But it's such an awesome community. As we talked about before, it's super inclusive. If you want to compete or just learn, we welcome everyone. We have women's teams. We have, all different types of historical thing, everything from the most athletic person to someone who's never done anything before. And our goal is to have people just have fun. And as I talk I'm not an owner of the Knights Hall. I'm not involved in it. I don't teach there, but I'm a huge participant and believer in this community. So if it really is fantastic. So I'd say if you want to find out more, feel free to contact me or find your local group. And you're not going to find anything else like it.
Very cool. Very cool. Ladies and gentlemen, Chuck Goodwin. Chuck, again, thank you for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure. And for everyone else out there, make sure that you slay your demons, and we'll catch you on the next show. So take care, everybody.